Now, the whole point of high school is pretty simple. It's 4 years of exposure therapy for your host of teenage insecurities, mixed in with a few facts about cell division. During this time, you're trying to answer the important mortal questions in life, like who am I? Who are my true friends? What do I want to contribute to the world? What does a boob feel like? All questions you'll likely never find the answer to. So, one thing everyone tells you in high school is to be yourself. But the problem is when you're 16, pretty much the only thing you care about is trying to be like everyone else. Nevertheless, what they really mean is you should go out and pursue the things that you enjoy so you can figure yourself out. The problem is that during high school, other kids can be harsh and judgmental and make you feel like the hobbies and activities you enjoy make you lame and uncool. Fortunately, this completely changes when you're an adult because people are lonely and keep their thoughts to themselves. When you're in high school, your mind is young and impressionable, and therefore incapable of nuance. If someone laughs at your joke, now you're the class clown. If your crush gets a boyfriend, now you're alone forever. And if some kid makes fun of your sketchers, time to start writing the manifesto. As a teenager, this is the first time you really start to build a personal identity for yourself, and in high school, this is pretty low resolution. Athlete, jock, stud, gamer, whatever you prefer to call yourself. As you probably know, a lot of adults tell you that high school doesn't really matter, so you should just enjoy it. And that's true in the sense that there are hundreds of people you're never going to see again, so you do get a hard reset on the time you said orgasm instead of organism, or when you're in geography class and mispronounced Niger. But what that doesn't mean is that you shouldn't care about high school, because unresolved experiences and insecurities from your youth can affect you for your entire life. For example, one time I got rejected by a girl, and now I have 200,000 Reddit karma. Now, a lot of teenagers think they're invincible, but I personally didn't get that at all. I remember kids were doing drugs, getting girls pregnant, and fucking up the rest of their lives while I was at home studying videos of how to order at Subway. It is true, though, that no matter what, you are going to do a lot of stupid stuff in high school, and this is because your brain hasn't fully developed yet. In fact, science has shown it isn't until the age of 25 that your brain finally starts to develop. Until then, it's just empty space inside your skull where stolen mannerisms and personality traits bounce around aimlessly until they randomly pop out during conversation in response to anxiety. Of course, during high school, you mostly finish going through puberty, which means you unfortunately stop growing in both height and length. Through the process of puberty, your body becomes fully biologically capable of reproducing. Just in case. Now, one of the most important things in high school is dating, because for most people, that's when you have your first relationship. The thing is, it can be really scary asking someone out because you've never done it before, but it's really a pretty straightforward process. All you have to do is glance at your crush during class every now and then, make eye contact at some point, and then you just fantasize about your relationship for the next 3 years until they start dating someone else. The good news is that by the end of high school, you've been around your classmates for nearly a quarter of your whole life, so everyone has already made their mind up if they like you or not. So the fear of getting rejected really doesn't make any sense in this context, because if you ask someone out and they say, ew, no, it's not like they just decided that the moment you asked them out. They've been thinking that for years. In general, dating is difficult in high school because when you're a teenager, you don't really have any life experience, so there's not much to talk about. And you might be thinking, well, what if we go on a date, but they don't like me for who I am? Like, bruh, when you're 16, you don't either, so just leave it to your mutual fear of dying alone. One of the best parts of high school is graduating, because you think to yourself, damn, I was really stupid those last 4 years. Glad I finally get it now. And yeah, that's going to keep happening, so I highly recommend you keep that in mind literally all the time. Now, one of the worst experiences you'll get after you graduate is looking back at missed opportunities. You'll run into a girl you had a crush on years later, and she'll be like, honestly, I thought you were so cute in high school. And you'll be like, why didn't you tell me? And she'll be like, well, I am telling you now. And you'll be like, oh, but I needed to know then. As you waddle away sadly. What is genuinely good news about graduation is that you finally finished the tutorial and have begun the rite of passage into adulthood, where your path first splinters and differentiates itself from your classmates. Some of your friends will go into computer science at university because they want to become as charismatic as Mark Zuckerberg. Some of your friends will go into trades so they can afford to live and make more trades. And some of your friends will say, I want to take a gap year and travel, which means I want to have sex with Europeans. So whatever your dream, just know that you have a long life to achieve it, so no need to worry about finding a hot German girlfriend on your first try. And there's just one thing to remember when you leave high school and choose your path into the future. It's that student loans follow you forever and are legally unforgivable even under the circumstance of death. Now, I'm no expert on dating, which is why you can trust I know what I'm talking about. So whenever it comes to first dates, the obvious question is, how do I get one? And I'm no pickup artist, I say, hoping you would have thought otherwise. But there's no magic words you can use to convince someone to go on a date with you. And if there was, the closest we have is writing, "You have beautiful eyes," in the Pornhub comment section. In reality, getting a date in this day and age is pretty straightforward. Convey that you're an attractive enough person in both looks and personality, and then wait for your step-parents to go on a cruise. Now, the obvious way most people nowadays are getting first dates is dating apps like Tinder and Bumble, and in my experience, a lot of people feel like they aren't getting what they want. Guys say things like, "Oh, I never get any matches, it's a waste of time unless you're like a male model." And then their profile is a blurry photo of them in cargo shorts holding a foot-long Chinook salmon. Now, I hate to break it to you, but if you expect to match with a Victoria's Secret model, you're going to have to get up to at least a 3-foot halibut. Similarly, a lot of attractive women say things like, "There's just no good guys on here. It's like, why do I even try?" And then their bio is like, "Sophie, 25, love to meet new friends and have fun, winky face." And as a guy, when you see someone put like no effort into their bio, you just think, yeah, still pretty hot. So now that we flash forward in time and you've got a date, we can start getting to the real issues. Now, there are a lot of questions I found on Reddit from people who've never gone on a date before, and so I wanted to get those out of the way really quickly before we move on. Where should I go for a first date? Somewhere you'd enjoy going by yourself anyway. So yeah, drinks. Where should I go if I'm not 21? I don't know, church? Who should pay on a date? This depends on if you made a YouTube video that month or not. So yeah, usually her. Is it bad to have sex on the first date? Well, I'm afraid it's 2021, so the question isn't whether you had sex, it's whether you held hands. Should you tell her your sexual fetishes on the first date? No. That's why we have Twitch. Okay, so let's get down to the biggest first date mistakes. Making the fact that you're on a date ambiguous. One of the most common feels bad man scenarios is going on a date with someone to somewhere fairly platonic like a cafe, and halfway through your coffee they start talking about their boyfriend, and you're like, "Oh no, hey, I don't know what you thought this was, and I probably didn't communicate this properly, but like, I'm down to experiment, dude." Leading with money. A lot of guys think that girls like men with a lot of money. This is false. Girls like cool men with a lot of money. So unfortunately, she's not going to be impressed that you bought GameStop and AMC at the top, even though you're sure it's going to squeeze any time now. Slow texting. A lot of new daters feel they have to artificially stagger their texting to seem busy or unavailable. This is stupid because you are available. Instead, you should artificially stagger your texting because you're overthinking every word of your response. Bragging. Bragging is probably one of the worst things you can do on a date because you convey to the other person that you're insecure about your social value unless you leverage your one unrelated source of measurable significance. Worrying about what to say. Most people get really nervous on dates, filter themselves too much, and awkwardly run out of things to say. The common advice that you'll find is that it's not what you say that matters, it's how you say it, which is mostly true, but that's like saying, "Don't be nervous and just be cool, you idiot." If you actually want the solution to being so nervous, in my experience, it's A, it's fine not to say anything, and B, have a storyline. If you know the topics and stories you really want to share, then you can just completely improvise. If this first section is your trip to Coco Bongo in Cancun, it might be a 5-minute story, but the conversation will inevitably splinter into her trip to Mexico, clubbing, regrettable experiences, and getting kidnapped by the cartel. Then when those topics run out, you just say, "Anyway," and go back to the main storyline. If you then run out of storyline entirely and the date gets really awkward, just grab your emergency kit, roofie yourself, and wake up the next day embarrassment-free. Doing something that doesn't match your personality. If you're chatty and personable, go for drinks. If you're more subdued and aren't good at talking, do an activity like hiking or pool or board games and allow her to absorb your personality by destroying her at bullet chess. Play to your strengths and your lifestyle. If you're an attractive guy, use Tinder. If you're really charismatic, get yourself into more social circles. If you're neither, like honestly, cheers. Oh, God. When someone says they were born in the year 2002, I automatically think, damn, this is the oldest looking 6-year-old I've ever seen. Well, I won't be using that one when they ask me about the island. I was born in 1996, making me just barely a millennial, meaning I'm somewhat of an expert on my older cohort who thinks doggo, pupper, adulting, and having an actual wedding to a real person they love is still a thing, while also being able to tell Gen Z that making fun of us for skinny jeans doesn't do anything. We inherited housing prices and 3 financial crises from the baby boomers. You will not even remotely psychologically affect us. You will not even remotely psychologically affect most of us. The first thing we have to do is obviously define the generations, which in the textbook is 1981 to 1996 for millennials and 1997 to 2012 for Gen Z. Problem is it can be hard to tell when you're kinda in the middle, because to the outside observer, Gen Z might look a lot older than they are on account of all the Botox and filler, whereas millennials look a lot younger than they are on account of all the Botox and filler, meaning you have to look at behavioral cues to tell the difference. Because us millennials are trying so hard to cling on to our youth, we're in fact only differentiable from Gen Z by 3 things: ankle socks, hairlines, and when a DJ says, "Put your hands up," we do it with an open palm, whereas Gen Z does it with a closed palm. Gen Z does this because you automatically close your hand when you associate with dropping down to the floor, whereas millennials raise an open palm because we don't think Black Lives Matter. While it might sound like I'm here representing my fellow millennials, I did only squeak in there by 1 year, and there are some millennialisms that are too ancient even for me. Take for example answering the phone. Why? Similarly, Gen X still texts like they have an old school brick phone, meaning all of their messages are like, "Yo, bring drinks, see you at 5, sunglasses emoji," which is at least chill and straight to the point. Millennials, in contrast, have all evolved the two-thumb texting technique, meaning they're able to send you a single paragraph-long text like it's an email that you avoid opening at all costs until you really have to respond. Gen Z, on the other hand, sends multiple messages to indicate punctuation or a different thought, usually ending it with a skull emoji to tell you they've died and will no longer be texting you back. If you're a smug elder millennial who's like, "Why does my younger sibling send 4 messages back to back when they could have just typed it in 1 message? That shit is so annoying." First of all, if you're annoyed because you have your phone on vibrate when I'm texting you, you can stick it up your ass. Second, if you looked at literacy statistics recently, Gen Z doesn't know how to read, so they don't know how to punctuate in the first place. And lastly, multiple messages is clearly the superior form of texting, anyone except your boss, because it allows you to better punctuate your rap battles with the homies. If you think about it, line breaks are literally poetry. When it comes to socializing and how you like to have a good time, millennials and Gen X are notorious alcoholics, but Gen X also does cocaine and millennials instead do weed. Gen X are alcoholics on cocaine because it was the rock and roll culture of the time, whereas millennials are alcoholics and smoke weed because they all have anxiety and need to self-medicate in order to socialize. Gen Z, on the other hand, was very gently parented, don't even pretend they'll ever own a home, and never socialize publicly, so they just take Tren, Zins, and Goon for dopamine. One thing that Gen Z clearly outdid the millennials on is their slang, because just like high school, millennials also blundered the language on more than one occasion, coining such terrible turns of phrase as doggo, adulting, epic win, on fleek, it's lit fam, swag, I can't even, I did a thing, and calling any type of knowledge hacks. In contrast, Gen Z slang had a stranglehold on our broader vocabularies right away. For example, here's some Gen Z slang you hear all the time, which I will now translate in case it's not clocking to you. Let him cook. He's in the process of doing something well that isn't cooking, so don't interrupt him. She ate. She looked good or did something well that isn't eating. Riz. Charismatically flirting. Crash out. Mental breakdown. Shit slaps. It's really good. Fire. It's really good. Hits different, it's really good. Bussin', it's really good. Gas, it's really good. No cap, for real. On God, for real. True, for real. Facts, for real. Deadass, for real. For real, for real. For real. One thing that older millennials have a terrible take on is that Gen Z has bad fashion. Gen Z has great fashion, especially compared to us millennials at the same age. Besides, when most millennials were teenagers, social media hadn't been invented yet, so instead of growing up trying to imitate the most liked Instagram trend, we had peace, contentment, and mixed and matched our clothing like a hand-me-down buffet exactly to our own taste. We didn't dress to impress, we dressed to express our deep cultural anxiety and fear of bothering our parents in case the baby boomers got mad at us, which they pretty much always were. You might not like it, but this was peak millennial fashion. To prove that Gen Z has better fashion than millennials, in today's social media, it's common for an influencer to be chatting up girls on the street like, "Yo, you're so pretty, can I get your number?" And she's like, "I'm 16." And the guy's like, "Oh my god, you can't be 16, what? I gotta get out of here, chat." But back in my day, you'd already know they were 16 because we were all ugly. Furthermore, Gen Alpha now thinks that point-and-shoot digital cameras give a cool vintage look, meaning guess what? Low-rise bedazzled jeans are getting thrifted, and American Apparel hoodies are right around the corner. We are so back, baby. At the end of the day, ask most millennials, and we sort of feel we grew up in the best era to be kids, but the worst era to be adults. Gen Z, on the other hand, just thinks, wait, things were actually good? As an example, when someone says "Make America Great Again," Gen Z thinks you can't make something great again if it was always trash. But baby boomers think, I remember when me and Steve worked for Chrysler and Detroit was the richest city in the whole world. I bought a house for me, my wife, and my 8 brothers and sisters back when we were 23. But millennials here make America great again and think, remember the first 150 Pokemon, the Sega Genesis, Rock Band, growing up without a cell phone, when you made YouTube videos just for fun, getting free malware on LimeWire, using an iPod Touch to pretend to drink beer, how people would say, too soon, after you made a 9/11 joke. Remember how badly we fucked up our teenage years, but it didn't matter because we had no social media? Remember smog? As I was reading this, I got nostalgic and remembered some more things, so I redid the video so I could keep going. Remember Deltora Quest? Ordering things from the Scholastic Book Fair? The Bermuda Triangle? Remember burning a CD? Remember CD drives in the first place? Remember when DLC was just another game called an expansion pack? Remember rewinding a VHS before you returned it to Blockbuster? I remember. Anyway, us millennials are gonna go stare at the Winamp visualizer for a while. You guys can talk amongst yourselves. Now, unlike me and most of the people I know who can't remember anything, nearly everything that you've done online is remembered forever somewhere, which is why you should consider today's sponsor, Incogni. As we both know, your online activity is not just stored forever between the two of us in our OnlyFans DMs, but also by data brokers, who resell your information online to whoever wants to get their grubby little hands on it. You might have heard the saying, if you're not paying for the product, you are the product. This wasn't the case for LimeWire, that was just piracy, but nowadays it's pretty much true. When you submit your data online to a website or they ask to track your information in exchange for a cookie that they never seem to deliver, that data is often getting stored and resold to third parties who might want to scam, spam, or God forbid call you on the phone.
While it does take just a little bit of time and effort, making friends is something that comes incredibly naturally to other people. And the problem is that while it seems like something that shouldn't be that hard, it's usually the first step that's the most difficult. For example, it's often suggested that you find a meetup group for people with similar interests, but when I tried that, I quickly realized I don't actually have any interests. In another instance, I thought about enrolling in an adult sports league, but then I looked at the Facebook photos from last year. Which brings us to the first and most important step of meeting new people: show up, even if you don't want to, which also applies to just about everything in life, including life itself. And if you're like me, you have most of your current friends by doing this accidentally. For example, I made almost all of my current friends in the same way, which is by getting put in the same high school socials class by a computer. The problem is, for most adults, there's no one to force us to do anything except for ourselves, which makes it hard committing to a new activity. This is why one of the best ways to incentivize yourself to meet new people is by saying that you'll buy yourself something nice, but only if you force yourself to go out and interact with people consistently for that whole month. This technique is called getting a job, which is the most common way adults make new friends. But if that's not your cup of tea, you can also consider things like dance classes, yoga, geocaching, archery, falconry, slam poetry, horseback riding, or kickboxing, and then dismiss them entirely after remembering that one weird acquaintance you don't want to become. For me, I've found the most luck by simply showing up to more events with my current friends and over time incrementally developing further relationships with their friends or regulars at places we always go. The problem here is you have to actually talk to people instead of doing a neat activity, so you have to have good enough social skills that you can express yourself authentically, which brings us to the second step of meeting new people. Don't be weird. And in my experience, I've never met someone who I thought was actually weird, but almost everyone is familiar with getting nervous and acting weirdly. And I found the only way to get over that anxiety is by improving your social skills and then having enough interactions go well that your brain stops worrying. But the downside here is that you're going to make some mistakes, and if you keep going back to the same place and screw things up with someone, you're never going to want to go back again in case they're there. Which is why if you're worried about having a really awkward conversation with someone and then running into them later, a great way to practice is by volunteering for the Make-A-Wish Foundation. Now, the reason why it's important to practice your communication is because it allows you to more effectively be yourself. Not literally, of course, because then you'd be at home, but in terms of self-expression, which is important because people are attracted to other people who are similar to themselves and to people who have traits they'd like to have. As an example, when I met my friend Jimmy, I wanted to be friends with him because he was sociable, funny, and outgoing, and he wanted to be friends with me because he wanted to bang my sister. Unfortunately for him, I didn't have a sister, but he said to give it 9 months. And this brings us to the third and final step of making new friends, which is stop fucking up the second step. And the trouble here is that for a third party, it can actually be indistinguishable from the alternative and much more wholesome third step of the friendship formula, which is fucking up the second step on purpose. And while you can certainly tell how good of friends you are with someone by what you feel comfortable talking about, before you can come out with inside jokes that might hit an insecurity, your rapport has to be built gradually as you each take turns adding another layer and another layer until you can eventually go for it. And when it comes to how to actually get there, there's certainly a strategy to it that isn't immediately self-evident. So much so that some people might think you looked up strategies online, but deep down they know it's just because they can't come to terms with the lunch they had to buy you at the end of the semester 6 years ago. Anyway, next time we talk more about making new friends, I'll be diving into some specific things like frequency, volume, and intensity of interaction, and explain the best way to have a conversation with someone the only way I know how, which is through a 4-minute monologue. I think when it comes to dating, guys are often looking for the perfect thing to say to a girl and completely miss out on the importance of body language. And being able to read how a person feels is really key in developing a successful social relationship. So I want to go through the 3-stage body language checklist that you can use on your own. Of course, stage 1 is the first encounter, and the first way someone will show interest is usually eye contact, and a few things can happen afterwards. A shy girl might look flustered and look away quickly, while a confident girl will hold eye contact and smile or maybe even wink. And the best course of action here is to live off that high for the rest of the week. After that, you have to watch out for proximity. Once someone knows about you and likes you, they'll try to be around you as much as possible. This might sound kind of creepy, but it's pretty normal, and particularly guys are notorious for doing this. One of the best ways to make sure you're being romantic instead of creepy is to be above a 7. Now, at this point, hopefully you've gathered that there might be some chemistry and you guys have started chatting a little bit. This is stage 2, building rapport, and it's where most dating takes place. You want to pay attention to any subtle physical contact. A good indicator of interest during conversation is if the girl touches you lightly on the arm or dick to emphasize a point. You might occasionally meet someone who likes to break the physical touch barrier with a high five. It can be hard to tell if she's doing it to congratulate you or because she wants to touch your hand, so I like to remove ambiguity by making sure all my accomplishments are particularly underwhelming. Along with that, you want to pay attention to her posture. People tend to cover their wrists and neck when they're uncomfortable, so if she is comfortable being around you, she might let her hands rest on the table or show more of her neck by tilting her head to the side. Keep in mind it could just be Lou Gehrig's. Okay, so this one you can experiment with. If someone wants to feel closer to you, they'll try to remove any barriers like a cup or bag from between your personal spaces. Sometimes if I feel a girl thinks I'm alright, I'll try to see what she does if I put something between us that stops her from talking to me. I usually just use my personality or stay at home, but you can also build a menu for it and say you make YouTube videos. And of course she can make more obvious gestures like licking or biting her lip. That's pretty hot. So if all the boxes are checked so far, hopefully you're thinking, hey, we're having a great conversation, lots of laughing, physical contact, everything is going well, and you're ready for stage 3, fucking it up. Really, this stage is pretty intuitive, but can take anywhere from 30 seconds to 10 or 15 years, so remember to be patient. A few of the more common signs are you've seen them recently, but they haven't seen you. They have a kid and it isn't yours. They have a kid and it is yours, and sometimes just not realizing anything is wrong at all. At any rate, don't stress everything on the checklist. It can all really be boiled down to just be yourself. So their pupils will dilate if they're interested in what they see, but it can be kind of hard to tell they have dark eyes, so take out your flashlight. Dating is the human courtship ritual whereby individuals in the species try to adequately determine a sexual partner. Although a natural process, it's something that's been pondered by the brightest minds since the beginning of time. Isaac Newton, one of the greatest mathematicians of the 17th century, yet a virgin until the day he died, once proclaimed, "Seducing a woman is like the cotangent function. No matter how close I get, I can never quite touch the pie." And it wouldn't be until the early 20th century that the mystery was finally solved when German theoretical physicist Werner Head-Turner Heisenberger suggested that while success itself cannot be predicted, the optimal time of approach can be modeled with his equation known as the male attractiveness net uncertainty principle, which is shown here. As for the corresponding variables, A is how attractive you are on a scale of 1 to 10, B is how drunk you are on a scale of 1 to 10, C is obviously just the speed of light, and then the D is just in inches. So lastly, you want to multiply by H2O when L goes to S, which is just the freezing point of water, and you get how long you should wait before talking to the girl you like. In modern times, dating hasn't changed much. It's still two people in a neutral, inoffensive location, doing something neither person wants to do while trying to mask their own degenerating self-doubts. And for first impressions, it really doesn't matter how much the other person has right, it's how much they have wrong. You can go on a date with someone who has the perfect face, great sense of humor, plays sports, awesome personality, apple-bottom jeans, boots with a fur, but there are no perfect 10s. They're a Scientologist. And based on the Bernoulli-Boudy principle, as the number of positive qualities in a person increases, the possibility of that person being a Scientologist or hairdresser exponentially approaches infinity. With all that said, you still might be looking for the fastest way to get to a girl's heart, and nobody knows more about dating than YouTube's 2015 Sexiest Hands Alive, You Suck at Cooking.
When I think of dating, I think of romance, and when I think of romance, I think of strawberries. It's been said that they teach us about vulnerability because they carry their seeds on the outside, which is just like me, because on a first date, I bring a complete list of my insecurities, so that way we can start by having zero secrets. This allows us to get as close as possible, as quickly as possible, as forever as possible. And much like the strawberry, I also wear my sunflower seed headband, which not only shows my ability to be vulnerable, but also keeps the enormous amount of nervous first date sweat from drenching my face, body, and mustache.
If you're like me, you never get approached by girls unless they're selling cookies, and beyond that, unless you're really attractive, famous, or have a puppy, it's all on you to break the ice with someone. You might be thinking, wow, that sounds unfair, what kind of double standard is this? But remember, don't hate the player, hate the game. Which I do. The good news is that because it's hard, that means if you're good at it, you really have a big step up on the people who refuse to try. Remember, when you're approaching someone, if you're just not weird, you're doing better than 95% of people. But as they say, easier said than done. Let's say you see a girl at a bar and you want to go talk to her. You think, maybe I should walk by to see if I hear anything in the conversation that might imply she's single, or maybe I should get my friend to spill a drink on her friend so she'll be alone and I can swoop in. Ask yourself, what would a not weird person do? Probably go up to her and say, hey, I thought you were really cute, I wanted to come talk to you, what's your name? You probably won't catch a response the first time because you forgot to breathe and might be having an aneurysm. This is normal, just sit tight and wait for the alcohol to give you a personality. So what if you're at school or work and there's someone you have a big crush on, but you're worried about messing it up because you're still going to see them nearly every day? You might be thinking, I'll just play it cool, hope we get put in the same group at some point and I can scope it out. Or maybe I should just walk up to her and say she looks exactly like my really hot sister. Ask yourself, what would a not weird person do? That's right. Keep up the good work. Now, it's not a bad idea to have a few go-to openers if you're in the same environment all the time. I think pickup lines are pretty dumb because they're really just jokes. But if I'm in the gym, one of my go-tos is, damn, nice glutes, looking thick. Mind giving me a spot? Then when they say okay, I just say, thanks man, and take it from there. One of the keys of making a good first impression is if the other person thinks you're both similar. So saying something you think the other person will relate to is a great idea. If I'm in the bar on Slam Poetry Night for half-price beer, there's a lot of lingering anxiety and existential dread in the room that can only be expressed through metaphor and loose rhyme. So what I like to do to show I'm on the same page is sit next to someone and say, hi, I'm James, what's your name? Oh, nice to meet you, Hope. Oh man, this stool sure is flimsy. All we need now is a rope. On the same note, when I was taking engineering at university and I just wanted to make friends, my go-to icebreaker was sitting next to someone and saying, hey man, have you ever touched a woman's hand? Then they usually laugh nervously and I say, don't worry, me neither, and give them a high five. Then I say I think it would feel like that, but a bit softer. Sad times. At this point I wanted to mention that if you're a girl, every guy on earth would appreciate if you approached us first once in a while. Even if we aren't interested, it's really flattering because it almost never happens. In fact, in my entire life I've been asked out by as many gay guys as I have girls, which is 0. So what I'm saying is if I could get on the scoreboard in any way, that would be nice. Now, if you're going to approach someone, you might be thinking, what if I get rejected? That would really hurt my ego and lower my self-esteem. Well, is that really as bad as living with the regret of not doing anything and wondering what could have been? If you're as fragile as me, it definitely is, which is why I have a permanent arsenal of coping mechanisms on standby, and I avoid difficult situations. But with that said, you can't expect someone or something to just fall into your lap, so sometimes you have to remember that rejection is just part of life, and you might have to be a little bit courageous. So, fundamentally, the friend zone is a bit of a relationship purgatory where, although it's not exactly gender exclusive, it's more often than not when a guy's sexual interest in a girl is met with only platonic friendship. And realistically, it's totally fine for a girl to like a guy's personality but not really be interested in a relationship. The trouble usually comes from the fact that a lot of the time, guys don't even realize they've been friend-zoned. And this can happen for a lot of reasons, but sometimes, even though a girl might not be interested, a guy can misinterpret the signal she's giving off and get too attached. So if you're a girl, try to avoid being in the same room, looking in our general direction, or winking both eyes at the same time. And sometimes, if a guy really doesn't get it, you might have to clearly tell him that you're only friends, or he's probably going to end up with hurt feelings at one point or another. Like I was recently at Starbucks, and there was a really cute girl taking my order, so we chatted for a second, and she asked for my name to write on the cup. Then when I got my drink, I saw that my name had 2 hearts around it. And that was honestly one of the best feelings of my life, and I was about to say something when I saw that she also drew a couple of hearts for a guy named Aaron right behind me. Fucking slut. Now, I'm sure some of you are wondering if you're in the friend zone right now, and it usually progresses in stages, so you can see which one you might fall into. The first stage is denial, which is believing you aren't in the friend zone. The second stage is anger, which is coming to the realization that maybe you are. The third stage is bargaining, which is begging to take her on a date even though she's always showing you pictures of other guys. The fourth stage is depression, which is realizing she was showing you those pictures because she thought you were gay. And finally, the fifth stage is acceptance, which is realizing that one of them's pretty cute and what do you have to lose? Now, the most important question of all is, can you get out of the friend zone? And interestingly, not too long ago, I was reading that a few psychologists at Penn State actually compiled a practical guide for men to get out of the friend zone, which looks like this. Of course, the first thing is identifying you're actually in the friend zone, then you execute the following steps. Step 1, be more attractive. It's worth mentioning while this guide is certainly effective, it can be kind of difficult to implement and at least takes a bit of time. So one last piece of advice I was given a while ago was if you're ever in doubt, ask the girl out. The logic being that she either says yes and that's great, or she says no and you have your answer. But I've realized that this saying greatly underestimates my power for debilitating retrospection, which is why next time we're talking about how to get out of the friend zone and into the friend with benefits zone, where nothing goes wrong and no one gets too attached. Temperature, generally speaking, is a measurement of a material's average internal kinetic energy at a given moment. Essentially, particles are always jiggling around, and the faster they collectively do so, the higher the temperature. It naturally follows that if these particles were to be completely stationary, we would have a minimum temperature, or what we call absolute zero. While this point can never be achieved, as any substance being cooled will asymptotically approach the temperature of its cooling agent, what would happen if we were to continually add energy instead? At 0.01 degrees, we have the triple point of water, where it can exist as a gas, liquid, or a solid. At 20 to 25, we have typical room temperature, and then at very slightly under 100 degrees, we have the boiling point of water. Increasing this to 600 degrees, we have the temperature of a typical small wood fire, and then just a bit hotter than that, we have Natalie Dormer, or in the scientific community, 1 ND or dorm. At around 10 dorms, we have the temperature of the Earth's core, which is quite similar to the surface of the Sun, and then around 24 kilodorms, we have the center of the Sun. Eventually, at an absolutely insane 9 gigadorms, we have the highest measured laboratory temperature, which was achieved in 2012 at CERN laboratories where researchers used the Large Hadron Collider to reheat a frozen Hot Pocket. This maximum temperature is known as HPP, or the Hot Pocket potential, and has since become a mainstay in thermodynamic studies of high-energy systems. At an incredible 180 tera HPP, we have the temperature of the universe when it was 10 to the negative 35 seconds old. Imagine all the matter in the entire universe contained in a nearly infinitesimally small space and the absolutely absurd levels of energy that were present. Finally, at 260 quintillion HPPs, or just under 142 nonillion degrees, we have the postulated absolute hot, or Planck's temperature. This is the point at which gravitational forces between particles would be as strong as other fundamental forces and proves to be a barrier to our current model of physics. There is one more temperature, which is unofficially named P+1, which is Planck plus 1, or a single degree above absolute hot. It's actually a field of study for me, and I coined this temperature as MNMT, which stands for Maximal Nuclear Measurement Temperature. But the acronym proved difficult to publish, so I eventually shortened it to simply My New Mixtape. So I think as a guy, it's really easy to see a girl you want to talk to, but you're too scared to actually go and do it. So I want to take a few situations you might find yourself in, and by asking yourself, what's the worst that could happen? I think it could really help make it easier to figure out whether you should make a move or not. Okay, so let's say you finished another unproductive work day and are walking down the street, and all of a sudden you see your favorite celebrity of the moment being escorted by a couple bodyguards. They seem to be in a rush, so before you make an approach, ask yourself, what's the worst that could happen? Yeah, there's a good chance she'll get tackled, and I think she's married, so not really worth the risk. Best be on with your day and keep a lookout for better opportunities. Okay, so let's say you're standing in line at the coffee shop waiting for the caffeine to bring you happiness, and after noticing the cute barista, you've been staring at her for a few minutes, and you're pretty sure she's looked back at you a few times, but it could just be to see if you've stopped. She might have winked just then, but the angle made it so you couldn't really see her other eye very well. Could have just been a regular blink. So ask yourself, what's the worst that could happen? Yeah, it's her job to be nice to customers, so you'll probably embarrass yourself in front of the whole cafe. Times are tough, and she was probably just trying to get that 16% tip. Wouldn't be the end of the world, but best wait for a better opportunity and never go back to that coffee shop again. Alright, so let's say you're sitting in the bar with your friend wondering if people think you're gay, and all of a sudden a pretty girl runs in and says, "Hey, I saw you from outside. I thought you were really attractive and seem exactly like my type. I just had to come over and give you my number." Ask yourself, what's the worst that could happen? Yeah, some guys might miss the obvious here, but don't be an idiot. There's clearly a hidden camera somewhere. Don't want to make a fool of yourself, so best be on with your day and wait for a better opportunity. So as the day is coming to an end, you're walking home through the park, and all of a sudden you see a little golden retriever puppy playing in the daffodils. And when you look around to see who it belongs to, you see a girl sitting alone on a picnic blanket. She's reading your favorite book, wearing a yellow sundress with glasses that are a bit too big, so she has to keep pushing them back up as she's concentrating. Has those little dimples on her cheek from smiling all the time, and probably has a really subtle Scandinavian accent that you'd only notice with certain words. Then as you walk by, she places her book down to stretch, and after a few seconds she makes eye contact with you, gives you a little wave, and then pats the space on the blanket next to her. So you go sit down, and her dog jumps all over you right away, and she says, "Wow, she's usually nervous to meet new people. It must be a good sign." Ask yourself, what's the worst that could happen? Yeah, you don't want to get your heart broken. Honestly, there would be no rebounding from that one. So today's my birthday, and before I choose where to invest my skill points, I thought it'd be a great idea to share the best pieces of advice that I picked up in my lifetime. The format's going to be a total of 10 quotes that I found really meaningful, and each will be followed by my interpretation. I chose 10 simply because I think it's pretty standard for these kinds of lists, and it's also the highest number I can count to, so let's get started. Number 10. So I was in a hotel one time and found this great quote in the Bible. "So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God he created them. Male and female he created them." Basically just remember to pull out. Number 9. No one plans to poop their pants. This just means to always plan ahead. The old buy a plunger before you need one, but also have an emergency fund and spend a bit below your means in case something goes wrong. Number 8. Elon Musk can't dunk. That is to say that no one's cut from a different cloth. You can't be the best at everything, and it's important to play to your own strengths. Number 7. Always remember that 4 to the power of 1/2 is 2, 9 to the power of 1/2 is 3, 16 to the power of 1/2 is 4, and so on. Which just means don't forget your roots. Number 6. The key to success is mastering the fundamentals. Basically, just constantly make workers and don't let your chrono boost pile up. Number 5. The glass is neither half full nor half empty. It's a matter of your own perspective. I was texting a few girls once that I was like 5 foot 9 inches, and some saw it like I was taller than about half of most guys, while others saw it like I was shorter. I'm more of a realist though, so since then I've always made sure to specify that I'm talking about 2 separate measurements. Number 4, be attractive to the kind of person you'd like to be with, and also be yourself. I really like this because it's really one of the more thought-provoking oxymorons. Number 3, hybrid builds usually suck, so min-max your life. As in, don't study and socialize, study or socialize. This is something that really doesn't apply to everything, so use your judgment. One thing that I started doing that's a bit more advanced is completely cut out regular coffee, so now I only drink decaf, but I add my own cocaine. Number 2, be like science, which just means that everyone's happier when you just say you're wrong or that you don't know. So next time you realize you aren't on the right track in the middle of an argument, you can just try my usual line, which is, "Hey, I never really thought about it that way before. Thanks for showing me another perspective." Cunt. And finally, my number 1 piece of advice is no matter how old you are, if you feel lost in your life and don't know what to do, just realize that you're not alone. No one has a clue what they're doing, and no one's path is a straight line trajectory from start to finish. Oftentimes it seems like there's a million things you could be doing, but nothing that's just right. But you have to get started before you know exactly where you're going, and the goals that you set aren't always destinations, but they are directions. And you can never know what you'll find if you're only looking from where you are right now. If anything, try something new, if only to prove that it's not the right choice, and you'll be amazed at the people you meet, the way your perspectives change, and ultimately what your ambitions and dreams become. And really, this is the best advice I could possibly give, and it's something I'm really going to incorporate into my own life. I know a lot of guys have trouble picking up on the signs of whether or not a girl is into them, so today I want to do a little quiz so you can see if she actually does like you, or even just how good you are at recognizing signals that you might be getting. Let's say you're in a bar and you look across the length of the counter and you see a cute girl who glances at you briefly, does a quick hair flip, and then turns back to her friends. Is she into you? Eye contact is obviously a good sign, but you really can't tell from this example. She could just be adjusting her hair, and maybe she was looking at someone behind you. So let's say you're at the office and your cute coworker is waiting behind you to make some copies of whatever people make copies of, and she says, "Wow, do you think you could go any slower?" and then playfully punches your arm. Is she into you? Again, you can't really tell from this example either. She might like you, but she might just be giggling and punching your arm as a sarcastic middle school throwback, so really no way to tell. Okay, so let's say you're at the gym on the elliptical for some reason, and Cutie McBooty comes in and gets on the exercise bike in front of you. And then after 5 minutes, she looks back and says, "Wow, I'm so sweaty already. If only there were a way to get the same workout at home riding something else." And then gives you a wink. She into you? Yeah, I still can't tell with that one. Exercise equipment is pretty expensive, and maybe she lives in a small apartment and just doesn't have space. So maybe you find a good deal on rowing machines somewhere, you can show her the flyer. Okay, so let's say you meet up with a friend that you've had coffee and drinks with a couple times, and she says, "I had a lot of fun on the last few dates we went on." That's a good sign because she thought those hangouts were actually dates, so suppose then she says, "How'd you like to come back to my place and watch Netflix tonight?" That's another good sign. It's usually a pretty good indicator when a girl invites you to do something, especially at her place. So then let's say later at her house you guys are watching Wall-E or something like that, and she says, "I'm getting pretty bored, why don't you come upstairs with me?" That's another great sign. She probably has something pretty interesting to do upstairs if it's better than watching Wall-E. So then after you go up there, all of a sudden she pushes you onto her bed, dims the lights, rips off her clothes, and you start having sex. Is she into you? Yeah, again, you really can't be too sure. It's pretty dark in the room, so she can't really see you properly. Maybe she's from Canada and was just being polite. Anyway, best bet is to just keep your wits about you and continue to look for signs.
First dates are very exciting, but also stressful for everyone involved. For guys, for girls, and for any nosy bystanders who can't mind their own business. And as one of those people, I wanted to create this as a bit of a primer for first dates, whether you've never been on a date before and want to know what to expect, or if you're a veteran of the dating scene and just want to figure out what's wrong with you. So of course, before you even go on a first date, you have to ask someone out. And there's a million ways to do that. In person, over the internet, that's pretty much it really. But you either get a yes or a no, and it's as simple as that. And the good news is that if you do get a yes, you're already ahead of the game because the other person is saying they like you, or at the very least you're passably better than a vacant time slot. Now, the first consideration is, of course, where you're going to go and what you're going to do. And in my opinion, you should really choose a date activity that reflects how well you know the other person. Like if you met by limp-wristedly flicking your index finger across a cracked iPhone, then there's nothing wrong with ice cream and a walk in the park because we all know you're there to see how they eat soft serve. On the other hand, if you've been platonic friends for 5 years hoping your next haircut is the one that will tip them over the edge, you better have a lot of alcohol planned because your current personality just isn't cutting it. So the most classic date idea is of course dinner and a movie, but unless you interpret that with multiple layers of euphemism, it's a bit cliche for a first date and a bit too reminiscent of its old school origin, which is getting married before you're 22, raising a family, and making God proud, which just isn't up to date with today's poor and sinful youth. I think your best bet is going with coffee, drinks, or a quick bite to eat, but it doesn't hurt to eventually try to expand your repertoire. I think it's a really smart idea to come up with fun activities that you can do together so you can focus on doing the activity instead of worrying about what to say. A few of my favorites include drunk paint night, drunk baking, drunk Lego, and drunk stand-up comedy. The common element being, of course, they're all things I do when I'm alone. Now, that brings us to the real nitty-gritty of a first date, which is how you're supposed to act. And you might have heard the old classic turn of phrase, just be yourself. And this is a terrible idea for a multiplicity of reasons, but what I think it really means, and should be said more explicitly, is that you shouldn't pretend to be something that you're not. So if they're like, "Oh, what do you do in your spare time?" and you like to play video games, then say, "I like to play video games." Don't make shit up to try to sound cool, and besides, how you talk about something is way more important than what you're talking about. Even if you're into something like coin collecting, you could be like,
I like coin collecting. Did you know that just by holding one in my hand, I can tell you the year that any 10-cent coin was produced? And when they say, what, really? Why only 10-cent coins? You can say, because I only date dimes. And then you show them your YouTube channel. The old 1-2 works every time. Now, unrelated, at a certain point you reach a difficult moment, which is figuring out if the date is going well, and girls and guys have their own distinct problems in this department. And from asking girls about their experiences on dates, the most common thing that seems to happen is thinking either, wow, why isn't he making a move? Or, oh shit, he thinks this is a date. On the flip side, the most common thing for guys to think is, I don't have a clue what's going on. Which actually explains just about everything. So if you do find yourself confused in the moment, you just have to triangulate those perspectives and Sigmund Freud yourself deep in their psyche to figure it out. And if that doesn't work, you can say you like them and see what happens. So very presumptuously, assuming the date went well, wherever you are, it's time to settle up the bill and leave. Now in today's day and age, guys are often confused as to whether or not they should be paying or splitting the bill or what. And really, the only person I know who said, well, he was great, but didn't pay for dinner, so that's a no, is my mum. So don't make a joke about that unless you pay for her meal. Sorry, Jen, you asked for this. But don't worry too much about it. If you're the one who asks them out, offer to pay, they might offer to split, and then it'll be awkward for a few sentences, but you guys will figure it out. Now, this is really the part where it gets interesting, because after you walk to the most proximal waypoint between both of your houses, you're going to stand there for about 5 seconds, glance down at your feet for a second, and say, and then you have to talk about your feelings. So what do you do? Do you set up a second date? Do you go for a kiss? Do you invite them to your place? Do you walk them home? Or do you kind of sit on the curb, talk for 2 hours, and then go home because you're both too scared to be emotionally vulnerable? I think at the very least you should leave saying you had fun and want to get together again, or get out of there and let them down softly with a text pretending it's you when it's really them. Now, I know what you're all thinking, casually explained. What do you think of people hooking up on a first date? And as long as you're not my neighbor and are both down with it, I couldn't care less. Nowadays, it seems like everyone is having sex before holding hands anyway. But with that said, while I'm not judging you for busting out the strap-on from day one, God certainly is. So, light a candle. Don't call them daddy. Call them father. Don't finish with hallelujah. Finish with a condom. Just the obvious, really. You'll be fine.
Flirting is really important because it's about expressing your interest in someone you like in a non-threatening and fun way. I think it's easy to think that flirting is how you interact with someone in a conversation, but it really starts from the very first impression that you make on the other person. The trouble is that for a lot of people, flirting isn't something that comes naturally. If I go to a bar and see a person I really like and want to introduce myself to them, my brain says, all right, good handshake, remember their name, remember your name, pick two. Then when things go south and I get up from the bar stool to leave and hit my erection on the countertop, I get a little bit demotivated, but really it's important to keep in mind that no one can be a smooth operator from the get-go, and it definitely takes some practice. So assuming you do manage to get through your introduction, it's a good idea to establish some kind of physical rapport. And a good way to do this is to touch the other person on the elbow when you say something they find clever or funny. In other words, you don't need to worry about it. Now, it's pretty easy to think, I really like this girl, but I don't know what I should do. And a really good idea is to practice your empathy by imagining you're the girl and thinking about what you'd like a guy to say to you. Even when you're talking about something like sex, one thing I've heard a lot from girls is, yeah, this guy was great, but he just finished and then fell asleep and didn't even think about how I felt. So the lesson I've learned there is if you want to be better at pleasing a woman, you really need to think about what it's like to be fucked by a dude. What's good about this is that because it's a thought experiment, you can do it whenever you have a free moment, whether you're on the bus, or at the gym, or just bent over the kitchen counter. So a big part of flirting is teasing, and this is essentially making small playful jabs at the other person that get a positive reaction and elevate the mood. Imagine a girl said to me, so your last video had a good amount of views, still staying up all night refreshing the page? That would not be very good teasing because I'd be really worried about how she found out. But if she said, damn, have you been working out? You're really starting to fill up that extra small shirt. That would be good teasing because it's been my goal for a while. Now, the way that guys and girls express their interest is very different, and generally the way that most girls will flirt with a guy is by laughing a lot and touching him on the arm. But this is also how a lot of girls act platonically friendly, and there's not really any way to know which it is until she tells you 3 years later when she already has a boyfriend. On the flip side, guys tend to flirt with a lot less nuance and generally prefer to set up a situation where they either get a definite yes or no.
There's a few ways you can do this. You can explicitly ask them on a date, go for a kiss, straight up ask them how they feel about you, or just send a dick pic. Different guys have different styles, so do what feels right for you. I like to send them at breakfast. That way they have the whole day to respond. Usually go for natural window lighting and use the macro setting, obviously. All in all, I think everyone should put in an effort to improve their ability to communicate honestly with someone they're interested in. If anything, it's worth making the effort, so if you do meet that perfect person for you, you don't miss a golden opportunity because of a lack of confidence. Just remember, I like to always think, even if I screw up and a date goes poorly, I can always go home that night and practice my empathy. In dating and relationships, a red flag is a small thing you notice in someone else's behavior that's symptomatic of a bigger problem. The trouble is that oftentimes a red flag can be hard to pick up on because red flags aren't only what someone does, they can also be what they don't do. And some red flags are certainly worse than others, so I want to start with the more mild ones and move up from there. Assuming you start with a blank white flag, at the lowest level we have red and white flags, which are just small quirks or inconsistencies that aren't bad, just kind of weird. Things like they don't lick the yogurt off the lid, they use Internet Explorer, they hold the door open for you as soon as they see you park your car, or they're apologetic even if something is your fault. Basically, if it can be explained with, "Oh, Canadian," then it's probably in this category. So let's get started on the serious stuff. Low-tier red flags. A low-tier red flag is something that's probably bad, but not necessarily a complete deal breaker. They don't laugh at your jokes. I thought this was just normal, but they say if a girl doesn't laugh at your jokes, she probably isn't very compatible with you. If a girl is really into you though, she'll likely laugh at all your jokes, even if they're not very good. They have a secretive past. This depends a lot on how communicative the person is. They might just be anxious about sharing personal details, but if they have no problem talking about anything and everything except their past, it's either something they don't want you to know, which is pretty bad, or they're a Russian spy, which is pretty hot. Putting you on a pedestal, that is to say they think you're way out of their league. This one's obviously more common for guys to do to girls, but it can go the other way around too. Imagine I was in bed with a girl. Just gonna let that sink in. Imagine I was in bed with a girl and she whispered, "Oh my god, casually explained, tell me again about how many subscribers you have." Of course, that would be a huge turn on and I have dreams about that, but it's probably going to be a pretty one-sided relationship. Think of how celebrities almost always date each other even though they could be with any fan they wanted. They have the same last name as you. That's a bad sign. In most places. Alright, mid-tier red flags. These are a bit more serious and are usually harder to overcome or talk about. Tread very carefully if you notice any of these. They're a stripper. On paper it might sound well and good, but when it inevitably doesn't work out, you'll realize that from now on you can only pay for things by card. Worth it. They don't have any independence. That is to say, if they have no interests or hobbies or ambitions in their life, it's likely they'll try to involve themselves in every moment of yours, which will eventually weigh you down and get in the way of your goals. Kind of like Reddit. They trash talk their ex a lot early in the relationship. This is usually an indicator they're still emotionally invested in their previous partner, and it can be very difficult to build a new relationship from the rubble of an old one. Got that from Tumblr. Using ultimatums. These are saying things like, "You have to do X," or "I'm going to do Y." You have to watch out though, because that's like me saying, "If you don't subscribe, I'm not going to be your friend," which I would never say. Only think. Alright, next is high tier red flags. These are the ones that are complete deal breakers and are pretty much always non-negotiable. They're married, unless you're into that. They're already pregnant, unless you're into that. They're under 18. This isn't just a red flag, it's a felony, but if you do find yourself attracted to girls who are still in high school, a great way to get over that is to talk to one of them. They treat waitstaff poorly. I think being mean to other people in general is a good sign of how they're going to treat you in the future, and I know that'd be hard to deal with because my self-esteem is based on what other people think of me. If you don't like their friends, people tend to be friends with people similar to them, and if someone surrounds themselves with unsavory individuals, it tells you a lot about that person. Now, after a long time, eventually you might find that after going on date after date or going through relationship after relationship, even just after meeting a lot of new people, you start to think, It really seems like pretty much everyone I meet has something wrong with them. They don't get me, they always have problems that they don't think are problems. I can't connect with them at all, and why can't I find someone who's not such a disaster? This is the maximum tier red flag. It's actually just you. This might sound pretty bad, but in a way, realizing that you might be a bit more responsible than you previously thought is the first step to becoming a more wholesome person and having better relationships with other people. And if you have a friend who shared this video with you, now is the moment where you reflect on whether they thought you'd find it funny and interesting, or if they're trying to passive-aggressively tell you something.
They say that the heart is a muscle, so in order for it to get stronger, you have to train it to failure. And while America is speedrunning that in real time, today we're talking about breakups. Breakups, also known in this economy as finding new roommates, is when you're in a serious romantic relationship with a partner and then say to yourself, I don't want to be with this person anymore. You then think, maybe a dog will fix this. When that doesn't work, you then think, maybe a kid will fix this. But I digress. I didn't mean to drag you into this. Conventionally, a breakup occurs in 5 stages, so I thought I'd go through each one step by step so you can see where and if you're on that timeline. Stage 1. The first stage of a breakup is always the hardest, which is finding someone to date in the first place. A reason why this stage is important is because the way that you get into a relationship in the first place can really determine your individual attitudes towards each other as it progresses. For example, when a girl gets asked out and she says yes, she's thinking, wow, what a cool guy, I'm so happy, my life's going to be so much better. But when a guy asks out a girl and she says yes, he's thinking, uh-oh, she must be an idiot. Stage 2. Seeing red flags in the relationship. Now, if you're watching this and think you're in a good relationship right now, it might be a good idea to check for signs that it's heading south before it actually gets there. So I decided to browse r/relationship advice in order to become an expert on the topic so I can share some examples of more subtle red flags you might not pick up on and how you should respond. Let's say you've been dating your girlfriend for 5 years and you live together. One day she's at work and you walk into the living room and see a magazine open on the coffee table to a jewelry ad. You look closer and see a couple engagement rings that are circled and one in particular with love hearts around it. How should you respond? Exactly, she's obviously never mentioned it, but she's clearly cheating on you with her husband, so best to break up and tell her that you're moving on. Let's say you've been on a few dates with a girl and you feel you have great chemistry. While you're creeping her socials as usual, suddenly she texts you, hey, I miss you, can we hang out again soon? Now this is of course a great sign, but you don't want to seem too needy, so set a timer for 1 hour so you can respond at exactly the right time. After that, a few minutes go by and then she sends you a message on Instagram. It's a picture of her in the hospital, kissing a bald guy on the cheek with the caption, me with my stepbrother. How should you respond? Exactly, I know Johnny sins when I see him. Best to wait the remaining 56 minutes, break up, and tell her that you're moving on. Let's say you're overseas from your partner and have been in a relationship as long as you can remember, but are currently having a big fight about the joint vision of your future. You want to pursue a more down-to-earth existence on your farm, selling hemp and cotton clothing you've grown yourself, but they're reaching their financial peak and want to experience the luxuries of life. You message them that you want to end the relationship, but they respond, to do what? To run your stupid little farm? I'm the one making all the money. How do you plan on being able to afford to do that without me subsidizing you? How should you respond? Exactly, you've already figured out a great way to keep labor costs down. Best to just declare independence and tell them you're moving on. Stage 3. The breakup. While breakups aren't fun for anyone, men in particular don't usually take rejection very well, whether it's from girls, election results, or especially art school. This is because if you're a girl and your female friend goes through a breakup, the game plan is clear. She'll text, "We broke up," to the group chat, then you all get together immediately, have a few bottles of wine, talk some shit about their ex, tell your friend she deserves better, and then have a pillow fight or something. For guys, the game plan is much more simple. He'll text the group chat, just a heads up, me and Katie broke up. You then reply, damn, that fucking sucks, dude. You good? He'll then say, yeah, I'm alright. And your job is done. What else could you possibly do? Now, regardless of whether you're a guy or a girl, whenever you're about to break up with someone, it's likely you'll start second-guessing your intuition, and it would be worth it if you struggled to replace them. So you have to ask yourself the most important question to see if you should go through with it. Who's going to pay the other half of the rent? While boomers and Gen X often complain that if you live with someone and break up, they get half your net worth. This of course isn't a problem for Gen Z or millennials because half of a negative number is pure profit. The real pain of course is losing custody of the houseplants. Similarly, one of the worst situations to be in when you're going through a breakup is when you have kids. This is the worst case scenario because not only is someone breaking up with you, but you also have kids. At some point you really have to start wondering how you keep fucking up over and over again. Stage 4. Getting over it. Whenever you go through a breakup, the most important thing is to not wallow in your own misery. You should only do that if your ex finds someone new in 2 weeks and they're exactly the same as you but hotter. Now, one of the critical steps of getting over a breakup is thinking about how your own attitudes and behaviors contributed to the relationship falling apart and what you could do better next time. If you ask a girl what would prevent another bad breakup happening to them, they might say, I should be more attentive and affectionate, and maybe communicate my thoughts more openly instead of expecting my partner to know, and make sure I don't make them prioritize my feelings at the expense of theirs. To men, self-reflection is of course way too complicated, as we like to have simple, concrete steps rather than vague hypotheticals, which is why if you ask a guy what would prevent another bad breakup happening to them, the answer is a simple 2-step process. Bench 3 plates, Bugatti Chiron. After stage 4, we of course have stage 4. Now they say that one of the best ways to get over someone is to get under someone else, but when you've just gone through a breakup, it's likely been a while since you've been dating, and you might think, well, I think I'm a 7, so that's what I'm looking for. And then someone else will say, I think you're a 5. Now in the dating market, this is called a bid-ask spread, and is essential to establish right away so you can see approximately what type of person is in your league. This is why when I get back on Tinder after a breakup, the first thing I do is set the radius to maximum, but you can pick any size of girl you want. Now, if you've only recently started dating again, the first thing you'll notice is how the dating meta has completely changed. If you're a girl, the first thing you're going to be thinking is, what the fuck is a Riz? And if you're a guy, you're going to be asking yourself, why does every girl I match with keep sending me links to viruses? The good news is that even though you might still be hurt by your fallen relationship, through the experience you've likely grown a lot as a person, so at least you'll have learned from your mistakes and won't have to do it all again. Stage 5. Do it all again. From this point, you simply repeat the process until you accidentally have a child, or you run out of money, or you try a polyamorous relationship until they go exclusive and you're the third wheel, or you get back with your ex and make it work because you overestimated your other options, or you realize that you can't say you don't like broccoli if you've never tried it, so you add Grindr to the rotation. Now, one of the worst feelings I've had going through a breakup was when they said, but are you sure? Do you really want to get rid of everything we've done together? I mean, maybe you could just keep me around and use me when you want to.
So, I have some friends who seem to go from relationship to relationship in the span of a few weeks, and others that have been single the entire time I've known them. And it's made me wonder, what are the chances of actually finding the one for you? So after thinking about it for a while, I came up with this formula which can roughly model the probability of meeting the right person after you figure out 3 things. How often you act on opportunities that arise, how many people you're interested in, and how many encounters you have in a given time frame. Once you figure out what these values are, you can then plug them into the formula to get the hope you have left. So let's start with our opportunity value. Some engineering friends told me that using an O as a variable is in bad form because it looks like a 0, but when I told them it represents the courage you have to talk to girls, they thought it was fine. Bear in mind it is a pretty substantial multiplier, so really sit down and think, out of all the recent opportunities that you've had to ask someone on a date, how many moments did you let slip away, and how many moments were you at least 7 out of 10 drunk? Now, next we have P, which is the fraction of people that you would be interested in, and figuring this out takes a bit of work, so if you're thinking, I can't be bothered, I'm down with anyone, then the P can be removed from the equation and you can use the new formula. Okay, so assuming that's not you, we have to be able to figure out how many people in the world that you would be interested in. Now, there are 7.4 billion people in the world, so if you're a straight male, biologically speaking, you have 3.7 billion potential partners, but we'll say 4 billion because it's 2017. Now, obviously you don't want to date someone underage, so we'll say they're at least 18, and you don't want to date someone too much older because then you're less likely to have much in common. Given my age, I'd say that caps out somewhere around 32 or 35. So obviously I prefer if they were single, but wouldn't be the first time I've broken up a marriage. Shout outs mom and dad. So let's focus in on the English-speaking countries, and this is personal preference, but I think a sense of humor is really important for both parties, so I'd really like to date someone who's at least as funny as me.
How is that possible?
Now, I'm pretty vain, so I want any accidental kids to be as good looking as possible. I'm not going to say I'm only going to date 8s and higher because people tend to end up with other people who they perceive to be in the same league. So we'll say 8s and higher with low self-esteem. Okay, so I'm looking for an English-speaking girl who's good-looking, single, and laughs at my jokes. That sounds pretty accurate. And after eliminating countries that aren't really viable, that ends up at around 10 million or 1 in 100 people, which is our value P. Okay, so moving on to the third and final variable, we need to figure out E, how many encounters you have in a given time frame. Now, the best way to do this is actually recording how many new people you meet in a year, month, or week, and then just extrapolating. But if you're just looking for a ballpark, they say the average person will interact with about 80,000 people in their life, which is about 2.7 people a day. So if you're a math guy, just use Euler's number as a default. I decided to actually count how many new people I've said hello to this last month, and that number ended up being about 2.5 a day. Unfortunately, the number of people who said hello back was about 1.8. That made me sad. Now, for the final step, if we take all the values that we have so far, we can put them into the HOPE formula, do some simplifying, do a little bit of number crunching, and the chance of meeting someone who could be the one for you is 1.35% per day, or 99% per year. All in all, that doesn't sound too bad, so with the good news behind us, when the day comes and you do finally meet someone who could be the one for you, all you have to worry about now is finding out if you're the one for them.